Young had been accused of shoplifting from a supermarket in a Columbus suburb. The officer shot her after she tried to drive away. He says she put him in danger. Tom Hansen has our report, and we want to warn you, some of the video you're about to see is disturbing.
Surveillance footage from last August appears to show 21-year-old Takiyah Young putting several bottles of alcohol into a bag, then leaving a Kroger in Blended Township, Ohio, without paying.
On August 24, 2023, Takiyah Young, a 21-year-old pregnant mother of two, walked out of a Kroger store in Blendon Township, Ohio. She headed straight for her car, her focus ahead. Moments later, she was dead. Two police officers stood nearby, already aware of her presence. Store employees had flagged them down, claiming she had stolen bottles of alcohol. Officer Connor Grubb moved in, stepping in front of her vehicle. His right hand gripped his holster, his left hand raised, a silent demand for control. "Step out of the car." Takiyah sat in the driver's seat, her window slightly down. She didn't reach for anything. She didn't push open the door. Her voice came through the open space, direct and clear. "Are you going to shoot me?" The officer didn't lower his weapon. The second officer remained near the driver's side, watching. Seconds passed. The tension between them grew. "Get out of the car!" Takiyah's hands were still on the wheel. Then, the car moved forward, slowly, inches at first.
As police confronted Young, she insisted she hadn't stolen anything, and Officer Connor Grubb pulled out his gun.
"Get out of the car!"
With Grubb in front of the car, Young attempted to pull away. Then Grubb shot through the windshield, killing her. Young was 25 to 28 weeks pregnant.
Glass shattered. A single bullet tore through the windshield. Her body jerked, her head tilting back. Blood spread across her chest. The vehicle rolled forward, hitting the curb before stopping against the storefront. Silence. Officers rushed in. Witnesses froze. A mother of two, a baby still growing inside her, gone. A single shot. A decision that cannot be undone. Was this justified? Was it necessary? Was this another case of excessive force? Where are you watching from? Comment below. Let's talk about it. Before anything else, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the pain and grief this tragedy has left behind. To the family, friends, and loved ones of Takiyah Young, we extend our deepest condolences. No words can truly measure the loss of a mother, a daughter, a sister, a young woman whose life was taken far too soon. Her children will grow up without her, her family will never hear her voice again, and a community is left with more questions than answers. Takiyah Young was born and raised in Ohio. She grew up in the city of Columbus, surrounded by family. Her childhood, like so many others, was filled with moments of joy and struggle. She was a daughter, a big sister, and later a mother. At just 21, she was already raising two young children, boys who now face a future without their mother's love, without her voice guiding them through life. She was expecting a third. 7 months along, a baby who never got a chance to take a breath. To those who knew her, Takiyah was more than just a name in the headlines. She was a person with dreams, with hopes, with a life that should have continued. Now her name is added to a list no one wants to be on, a name that sparks outrage, sorrow, and debate. But beyond the headlines, beyond the controversy, there was a life that mattered. And that is what makes this so heartbreaking. Tonight, as we walk through the events that led to this moment, we remember Takiyah Young, not just for how her life ended, but for who she was, a young mother taken too soon. May she rest in peace. It was August 24, 2023, in Blendon Township, Ohio, a busy Kroger store. Customers moved in and out, shopping carts rattled against the pavement, car doors slammed shut. People were focused on their own lives, some grabbing last-minute groceries, others scrolling through their phones as they walked. It was a scene repeated across America, a normal evening in a small town, but what happened in the next few minutes would change everything. Inside the store, surveillance cameras captured a young woman moving through the aisles. 21 years old, 7 months pregnant, a mother of two. Takiyah Young. To most, she was just another shopper, but to store employees, she had already drawn attention. They claimed she had taken bottles of alcohol, slipping them into her bag without paying. Security footage would later reveal those moments, her actions, her expressions, her body language. But at that moment, nothing was certain. Outside, 2 police officers stood near their cruisers. Their radios crackled. A voice came through, an employee reporting a suspected theft. A finger pointed toward the parking lot, toward the young woman walking out of the store. The officers turned their heads, their focus shifting instantly. Takia stepped through the sliding doors. She didn't run. She didn't look back. Her pace was steady, her expression unreadable. She walked straight toward her car, a black sedan parked in a handicap spot. There was no license plate on the back. That detail alone would have caught an officer's eye. Now, paired with the accusation of shoplifting, it became a reason to act. Officer Connor Grubb moved first. His steps were quick, his posture tense. His right hand rested on his holster, his left raised slightly, ready to give a command. The second officer followed, his position more controlled, his focus locked on the unfolding situation. Takia reached her car, pulled open the door, and placed the bag inside. She sat down, one hand gripping the steering wheel. The door shut behind her. The engine rumbled to life. The officers were closing in. Officer Grubb stepped directly in front of the vehicle, his stance wide, his presence blocking her only way forward. His voice rang out, firm and direct. "Step out of the car." The second officer positioned himself at the driver's side, one hand resting near his holster. His expression was unreadable, but his posture told the story. They weren't leaving without an arrest. Takia's window was slightly down. She wasn't reaching for anything. She wasn't making sudden movements. Her hands remained on the steering wheel, her voice carried through the open window. "Are you going to shoot me?" The officer's response was immediate, his voice sharp, unyielding. "Get out of the car?" She didn't move. The parking lot, once filled with the noise of an ordinary evening, had changed. Shoppers stopped walking. A woman holding grocery bags turned her head. A man loading his trunk froze, staring at the scene unfolding before him. The shift in energy was undeniable. Something was about to happen. Then a detail often overlooked. A small figure in the back seat. A child's car seat, empty. Was she here alone? Or had she just dropped her children off somewhere before coming to the store? Would this be another tragedy where a child loses a mother in an instant? Takia's eyes flicked between the officer in front of her and the second officer standing nearby. Her grip on the steering wheel tightened. Seconds stretched, hanging heavy in the air. She moved the car forward, not fast, not reckless, just inches. And in that split second, everything changed. On August 24, 2023, Takia Young sat in the driver's seat of her car, her hands on the steering wheel, her window slightly down. She looked straight at Officer Connor Grubb, who stood directly in front of her vehicle, his gun drawn. "Are you going to shoot me?" Her voice was firm, her expression unreadable. The second officer stood near the driver's side, watching closely. The parking lot, once filled with routine movement, had gone still. "Get out of the car!" Grubb's voice was louder, more forceful. Takia didn't reach for the door. She didn't put her hands up. Seconds passed. The woman inside the store, watching through the glass doors, placed a hand over her mouth. A man in a parked car gripped his steering wheel, eyes locked on the unfolding scene. Store employees exchanged looks, their expressions tense. Then the car moved forward, slow, barely rolling. It wasn't speeding, it wasn't swerving, but it was moving. The crack of the bullet shattered the windshield, sending fragments of glass across the dashboard. Takia's body jerked, her head tilting back. Her hands slipped from the steering wheel, blood spread across her chest, soaking her shirt. The car drifted forward, crossing the pavement with no control, rolling toward the storefront. It bumped the curb and came to a stop against the building. The second officer rushed to the driver's side, pulling the door open. Officer Grubb stepped forward, gun still raised. Store employees gasped. The woman near the entrance covered her mouth, shaking her head. A man in the parking lot grabbed his phone, fingers fumbling to dial. Takia sat slumped in the driver's seat, her body still, blood pooling against the fabric of her clothes, her breath faint, fading. Then, the sirens. Paramedics arrived, moving quickly, pulling her from the car, laying her on the pavement. Hands pressed against her wounds, voices shouted. They checked for a pulse, for any sign of life. Nothing. The unborn child inside her, due in November, never took a breath. A mother of two, a baby who would never be born. Gone. The parking lot, once filled with the sounds of a normal evening, had become something else. A shot fired, a life taken, a decision made in seconds, a moment that could never be undone. Takia Young lay on the pavement, her body still, her breath barely there. Blood spread across her chest as officers hovered over her. Officer Connor Grubb stepped back, his gun lowered but still in his grip. The second officer, moving quickly now, reached for a trauma kit. The radio crackled as dispatch was notified. Shots fired, medical emergency. Sirens could already be heard in the distance. The officers applied pressure to the wound, their hands pressing against the injury caused by the single bullet that tore through her windshield, through her body, through her future. Her pulse was weak, her breath shallow. Nearby, a man in a parked car sat frozen, his phone in his hand but no words coming out. A woman near the entrance of the store turned away, her face pale. Store employees whispered among themselves, the shock settling in. A passerby ran toward the scene, a doctor, an emergency room physician who happened to be in the parking lot when it all happened. He knelt beside her, his voice calm but urgent as he instructed the officers to move aside. His hands took over where theirs had been, checking her pulse, assessing her injury, looking for any sign of hope. But there was none. The news spread fast. Within hours, social media exploded with outrage. A young black mother shot through her windshield over an accusation of shoplifting. Questions flooded online spaces. Why was lethal force necessary? Why was a gun drawn on a pregnant woman sitting in her car? Why did a shoplifting call end with a death? As the hours passed, the body cam footage became the center of the conversation. Officials hesitated at first, withholding the names of the officers involved, but pressure grew. The calls for transparency became louder. The video was released. The nation watched as the final moments of Takia Young's life played out. Her voice, her question, her car moving forward, the gunshot. Protests erupted across Ohio and beyond. Civil rights groups demanded accountability. Community leaders called for justice. People took to the streets, holding signs, chanting her name. They called it an execution, an unnecessary killing, a failure of law enforcement to de-escalate. The divide between those who saw it as justified and those who saw it as excessive widened. But for Takia's family, there was no debate. A daughter was gone. A sister was gone. A mother of two expecting a third taken in an instant. Her children, too young to understand, left without her. The legal process moved forward. Nearly a year later, on August 13, 2024, Officer Connor Grubb was indicted. The grand jury brought forward serious charges: 4 counts of murder, 4 counts of felonious assault, and 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter. The weight of the case was undeniable. The justice system now had to answer for what had happened in that parking lot. Grubb turned himself in. His first court appearance was brief. A video screen showed his face as he attended the hearing remotely. His bond was set at $250,000. Hours later, he posted bail and was released. Now the legal battle begins. The courtroom will determine whether the shot fired that evening was justified or whether it was a crime. Prosecutors will argue that Takia Young posed no real threat, that deadly force was unnecessary, that another choice could have been made. The defense will claim the officer acted within his training, that he felt in danger, that the situation left no room for hesitation. The trial has yet to begin, but the weight of the case is already heavy. The world is watching, the family is waiting, the community is demanding answers. A single moment, a single shot, a decision that cannot be undone. Her 2 little boys, too young to understand, left behind with questions no child should ever have to ask. Where is their mother? When is she coming home? The answer, one they would never be ready to hear. She isn't coming back, her grandmother, heartbroken and filled with grief, spoke out. Her voice trembled, but her words were firm. She should be here. She should be with her babies. She should be preparing to welcome her new child into the world, not buried in the ground. The pain in her eyes was something no courtroom ruling could ever erase. the weight of her loss, something no verdict could ever undo. Her family didn't stay silent. They demanded justice, they wanted answers, they wanted accountability. How could a routine theft call turn into an execution? How could an officer, trained to serve and protect, fire into the windshield of a pregnant woman? How could her life be taken so quickly, so easily, and with no chance to explain herself? The community rallied behind them. People filled the streets, holding signs with her name, chanting for justice. The same words echoed over and over. Say her name, justice for Takia. No mother should die like this. The protests spread beyond Ohio. In cities across the country, voices joined the movement, calling for change, demanding an end to unnecessary force, pleading for police reform. People debated, some arguing that officers face impossible decisions, others stating that those same decisions are too often deadly when the suspect is black. The footage of Takia's final moments played on screens across the nation. Her voice, her last words, "Are you going to shoot me?" That question burned into the minds of everyone who watched, a question that should have never needed to be asked, a question that was answered with a bullet. Discussions on policing took center stage again. Activists spoke out against the pattern, black individuals losing their lives in situations where de-escalation could have saved them. Experts debated the use of deadly force, questioning why a shoplifting accusation ended in death. Officials called for new training, new policies, new oversight. But for Takia's family, it was too late. Change, if it ever came, would not bring her back. The legal battle was far from over. Officer Connor Grubb was indicted, but would he be convicted? Would a jury find him guilty of murder, or would they decide that his actions were justified? Would he serve time, or would he walk free? The courtroom would soon become the next battleground. Prosecutors would argue that Takia Young posed no immediate threat, that her car moving forward was not an act of aggression, that she was unarmed, carrying no weapon, carrying only the life of her unborn child, that the officer had other options. The defense would push back, claiming the officer feared for his life, that his decision was split-second, that he fired because he believed he was in danger. The jury would hold the final decision, the weight of justice resting in their hands, the outcome uncertain. For Takia's family, there would never be closure. No ruling would bring her back. No prison sentence would replace the mother her children had lost. No legal victory would erase the pain of a life taken too soon. And so the question remains, was this a justified shooting, or was it excessive force? Was this an officer following his training, or was it another case of a system failing to see the value of a black life? What do you think? Was this necessary, or was this an avoidable tragedy? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. Thank you for watching.